I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Yes. All right, just getting the background reset. All right. Oh, what's up? Oh, our special guest arriving earlier than expected. Surprise, everybody. Hiram Rivera's in the building. What's up, everybody? Dhoruba Bin-Wahad, of course, my favorite philosopher, political theorist, the main man activist, BLA, BPP, BPM regular. We just saw him on the other day with Ajamu Baraka, Jackie Lukman, and Kalanji Jamachanga on the Riot Starter. Fantastic discussion, global international politics. And I'm very happy to have both of these brothers join me this morning to drag them all in a different direction politically. At least topically, not politically, but topically, I should say. Dhoruba, how you feeling? Hiram, how you feeling? Let me unmute, make sure everybody's unmuted.
Yeah, I'm doing swell, Jared. You know I'm doing okay, man. If I answered your request at 4:00 in the morning, and here I am.
All right, is that? What's that playing in the background? Who's got something on?
That's these kids down in Montgomery.
Okay.
Beefing about Eddie Harris Jr.
Oh, okay. You know, all right, my bad. Right on.
And how he didn't have no class. You know.
Okay. All right. Well, Hiram, how you doing, my man? Good to see you. Thanks for joining us this morning.
I'm good, Jared. I'm good. Real excited for this moment here in Black Power Media Sports. BSPN, if you will.
BSPN, yes. I'm definitely stealing that. That's stolen. Just recognize that's stolen.
Right. And honored to be here with the legendary Dhoruba Bin-Wahad. Yeah. So talking football, but hey, I'll take it.
Hey, I mean, so Dhoruba, as you started chatting with me, and I'm never comfortable not agreeing with you.
That's stupid, man. What are you talking about?
It's facts. If I don't feel comfortable I don't recall there ever being another time where I was like, I don't agree with you. But on this one, I think, we don't see eye to eye on this one. And I said, so we have to have the conversation. I would, any excuse to get you to come on is what it is. So if this will do it, then I'm happy to have it be this. But if we can, I got a little clip so we can hear from Deion himself, and we can sort of set the stage for what set us off on our conversation. And then separately, Hiram had expressed interest in coming on and talking about sports. So I said, let's see if we can get you all on together, and let's do this now. So as you see behind me, this is from a week ago, where the two coaches met after the game. Deion Sanders, of course, the legendary NFL and baseball player. I think one of the best athletes to ever do it. I got to see him live. I was a big fan. I deeply appreciate him for what he did as an athlete with his career, all of that. He became the head coach of Jackson State, HBCU, and has immediately done in coaching what he did as a player and as a pundit or anything else, as a marketer. He got in the mix and started saying, well, where's the money going? And I want my cut, and I want to make sure we get our cut. So as he continues to remind us, for those who don't know, please go check his history. He did this with coming out of college as a defensive back. He recognized that in the NFL, defensive backs were underpaid. He knew he was about to change the game. So he marketed himself, and he famously went to the combine, the slave combine, is something like I think it's appropriately compared to. And he refused to do any of the other. He no bench press, no jump, no nothing. He went in there, ran the 40-yard dash, and then literally kept running and left the stadium. And to this day has a top 10 40 time in terms of the speed running the 40-yard dash in under 4.3. Bo Jackson, I looked it up, oddly, still has the highest at 413 or 419, depending on who you believe. But either way, good God. I mean, Bo Jackson, good God. That's amazing. But my point is, Deion did this so that he could market himself and say, listen, I'm not going to get paid like these other cornerbacks. You're going to pay me correctly based on what I do on the field. And I want that to happen for the whole position. And he did that. He got paid correctly. The position changed. The perspective of it changed. Nowadays, cornerbacks can be some of the highest paid players on the field, et cetera. But then so that's been his thing. So when he came to the HBCU world of sports, and he said, specifically in this case, HBCUs, like smaller colleges in general, get a paycheck to play big universities and get punished. And it's supposed to give exposure to some of the smaller schools. It's supposed to give them a chance to see blah, blah, blah. But it's also, of course, to give them a chance to make a huge payday. But he was saying HBCUs get paid far less than PWIs who are set up to do the same thing. And then he went into some other important aspects of it as well, in terms of the emotions and the tactics and the teaching and all the other kind of stuff. So just very quickly, I wanted to set that stage and then play a little clip so you can hear Deion himself making the case in this short segment here. And then we can I'll turn it over to my co-panelists here, and we can chop it up a little bit and get to where we agree and where we disagree, et cetera, and so forth.
And I'm looking at numbers that they gave me. Marshall got $1.25 million to play against Notre Dame. Appalachian State got $1.5 million to play against Texas A&M. Georgia Southern got $1.4 million to play against Nebraska. Okay, and so forth. Now let's get to us. FAMU got $450 to play against North Carolina. Southern, thank God, you got $760. I like that. Alabama State, $590 for UCLA. You probably exhausted that in the flight going all the way across the country. Bethune-Cookman, I don't even know what their payout is. We still trying to find out that. Alabama A&M, $300,000 as well to play against UAB. If we're gonna get our butt kicked, shouldn't it be worth it? How in the world are we selling for the peanuts and the little minute droppings that they're giving us, when everybody's darn near $500,000-$600,000? Should we get together and huddle up as a HBCU and say, we're not playing these beat down games unless we get this? Now, don't go up under it. You can negotiate above, but have the level be $750 or $1 million. Have something. Make it worth your team's while, because you're going to lose players. You're going to lose pride and dignity when we sit up here and telling you we're just as good, but you go out there and show that we're not as good. We're not nearly as good. And then you're losing 3 to 4 players because of the type of beating that you've got. Now you got to lift them and build them back up the next week to go back there and say, you could do it this week. Forget about last week, but you could do it this week. I don't understand that. I don't understand how we allow these other schools to get these type of purses to play against the same team that we're playing against. So who's negotiating this? Can we get together and form a committee or something and say, we're not doing it unless we get $1 million? Negotiate up, but don't negotiate down. And that $1 million should go directly to your football department. They out there getting their butts kicked. Not the rest of the school. They out there getting their butts kicked. They out there getting abused. They out there getting hurt. They out there getting injured. And now you want to spread it out amongst the school? I don't agree with that. If they out there playing, they should reap the benefits of the sacrifices that they're making. I just don't like when I'm seeing guys get 1.4, 1.2, 1.7, or whatever, and we getting peanuts. I don't like that. So that means we're not doing well business-wise. I just want to alarm you on that kind of stuff, because that's the kind of stuff I think about. And that matters to me. That's the ultimate sellout to me. So I'd rather us get together, somebody take the lead. I'd be glad to. I'm used to being in that position, and say, you know what? We're not doing it. Well, Coach Brown, it's easy for y'all to say, no, we're in the same financial situation. You're not in a better financial situation than any of the rest of everybody. We may do more. We're able to work more, and we're able to go out there and get more because we got to go get them. But when it comes to selling our kids out, I can't take it, man. It frustrates me. It angers me. It upsets me wholeheartedly. And I'm sorry, presenting, but when I see that kind of stuff and I look at those stats, and it makes me mad. It really does. Because we're trying to preach that we're just as good. Then we go out there and get beat down for peanuts.
Oop, there it is. Okay, everybody, there it is. That's the short of it. And yes, Deion is coach of Jackson State in Mississippi, and in the graphic, as I was saying behind me, when he played, I think I'm forgetting the brother's name already, but Alabama State, I believe.
Eddie Robinson Jr.
Is that Eddie Robinson Jr. there?
Not
okay, my bad.
Eddie Robinson, but a different Eddie Robinson Jr.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
no
okay.
relation, no
right
relation.
Okay.
Yeah.
No relation. Okay. So he went to shake hands and do the extended, brotherly hug thing. And Eddie Robinson Jr. Resisted it, pushed him off. They had a little, had like a little word or two. Robinson went on to say that he didn't like Deion's demeanor, his approach, his style. And then he went on worse to say that he's not SWAC. I'm SWAC. He's not SWAC. He's not a representative of the conference. So that was so not everybody appreciates or understands or is on the same page with what Deion is trying to do. And I don't know that their disagreement was specifically over this issue, but just that's so. Let me just stop there. What do you all, Dhoruba? You want to lay out what it is that you had to say about all this, and then we can go from there.
Well, thanks for including me in the dialogue. But I'd be more interested to hear what the younger brother Hiram has to say, his take on it before I comment. Is that cool?
It's fine. Hey, whatever you want.
Because I'm more interested in what he has to say right now, because he's younger, and I think that the way this hits him might be qualitatively different than the way it hits me. So okay. I'd be really interested in that.
I think the Deion Sanders stuff has been really interesting to watch since he first came on, right? Deion brings that name recognition. He's prime time and has brought that at least at Jackson State. And the idea is that with Deion's notoriety, Deion's celebrity, Deion's bravado, that is going to have an impact over the whole HBCU football system. Right. And what Deion is trying to do is trying to capitalize on that and impact these pay-for-play games, what they call pay-for-play. So in the elite universities, what they refer to as the Power 5 conferences, the Big Ten, the ACC, the SEC, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio State University, those schools, ones you see on Saturday, throughout the season, they schedule these cupcake games, right? These games are going to be easy. They just kind of practice. And they pay these schools because the schools know they're about to get blown out. They're going to lose about 50 on national TV. Their boys are going to be embarrassed. They're going to get run off the field, right? And so they want some sort of compensation for that. And the risk of injury is higher. Deion has spoke about this last year about not playing those games because of this pure physical danger that puts the other players in, because they're playing against damn near professional athletes at that point. And I get his point around the HBCU schools coming together to demand more money. And what you end up having, what's missing here, is that the NCAA is broken up, and Division I football is broken up into two sections, right? It's FBS, which are the schools that I named, and the FCS conferences, which are the D1AAs, the smaller schools. And they're broken up by facility size, by campus size, by all of that. Within the FCS, the HBCUs are then their own separate thing, right? All of this becomes a consequence of integration. So back when segregation was the rule of the day, right? The HBCU schools were powerhouses in the game of football back when football was coming up. And so you had some of the greatest players, Walter Payton, Jerry Rice, McNair, a lot of folks came out of HBCU schools. Once integration happened, then these predominantly white institutions were able to recruit these players and completely destroy the whole HBCU system. And so what do I disagree with Deion? I disagree with Deion in his commitment to solely to the money, right? And this thing about, well, we should demand more to get beat down. We should demand more, right, to get more, and then all that money go to the players. What Deion is not saying is that there has been a fight for the last, I would say, almost 10 years at this point, right, around the illusion of amateurism in college football and whether players should be paid or not, right? Deion is staying away from the crux, the main battle that's being had right now around the unionization of college football players, right? To completely remove the veil of amateurism from sports and call it what it is, the minor leagues for the NFL, and pay these boys like what they are, employees of the university, right? And through that, have them unionize, collective bargaining, right? So they can recruit some of those profits that they're making for these universities. I don't know, and I'll wrap up with this. At these predominantly white universities, the Ohio States, the Texases, the Notre Dames, these football teams are making about minimum $60 million a year for their universities. With that money is what they build these cancer centers, these dormitories, these other buildings on campus. I don't see HBCUs being able to generate that level of revenue off of these pay-for-play games, or just in general, while these elite institutions, with their contracts to Nike, with their contracts to Adidas or whatever, still dominate the game. I think for me, the fight is around the unionization of college football and removing that veil of amateurism that has ruled over it and has allowed for the exploitation of these boys for eons and eons and eons. But as Deion is trying to get himself a job at one of these Power 5 schools, that's the other thing, right? Deion is talking HBCU, we're going to bring it back, while actively interviewing for jobs at University of Tennessee, at Florida State University, right? So Deion is trying to get himself off to one of those Power 5 PWIs as well. And so when
Is that why he was defending Nick Saban?
I mean,
well, I think first of all, I think that the brother is correcting on a number of issues, especially in his conclusion. But I think you're wrong about a lot of things. First of all, you're wrong about if you really look at what Deion has been doing and saying since he came to the HBCU, he's going directly at. He's not just talking about playing to lose and playing to get beat down and getting paid. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about changing the whole mentality of the HBCUs and their approach to these athletes and giving these boys a chance to compete on the level that they deserve to be seen on. I think I totally disagree with that aspect that he's just doing it, for the payday. Sanders already got money. And if you look at the involvement that he had in the recent water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi, he connects the players to the community. Most HBCUs don't even do that. Okay, they just use the fanfare and the university to bring together alumni so they could barbecue on the homecoming days and all of that stuff. So if you listen to Sanders, he's not just talking about getting paid, to get beat down. He's talking about changing the whole flavor of the HBCU, which I agree with, because I think the Boule Negroes that we have right now in positions of misleadership, many of them came through the HBCUs. Many of them were down with the Spike Lee stepping culture and the Greek culture. Look at your homeboy Roly-Poly Martin. He came out of that whole milieu. Okay, so don't tell me about the mentality that Deion Sanders is bringing to this, despite whatever ego or whatever flavors, that swag that he might be, is that he inspires these young boys. I watch it. I watch football. I've watched football very well. And he inspires these young boys. He don't inspire them to just go out there and play and then go on about their business just to get a degree. He inspires them to dominate in whatever they do. He inspires them to win, not
That's
to
his
continue.
word.
And that's my word too, dominate. And that's been my theme from the founding of the Black Panther Party to now, dominate. Okay, and that's what he teaches these kids, and he teaches these kids that in a way that they have respect for him because of his history and because of his swag. What you got to recognize is that, and my boy is in a D1 school, and he's a D-back. He's in a D1 school, and when I look at the politics of these coaches and how these teams are like 70% black, and these coaches really can't. A lot of them can't relate to these kids. They got a system. They got their own world that they're in, and you got to adopt the culture of the community that the team came from. And so you got inner city kids playing at Alabama with Nick Saban. Whatever I want to say about Nick Saban got money, and he's able, the LSUs and Alabamas, they do have the money. And what the brother Hiram was talking about is absolutely clear. That these schools cannot at this particular point draw that type of income money and compete with these schools. And this is what Deion says. They say, well, are you ready to play Alabama? Are you you touting your quarterback and your teams, and y'all blowing people out? You're ready to play a serious D1, a number 2, number 3 contender? And Deion said no. Because we don't get those big boys up on the front like y'all do. Y'all able to give them money, y'all able to bring them in, and so no, until we able to recruit and get kids coming to these schools like y'all do, then yeah, we might be able to compete. And one of the things I learned from going with my boy around when he had 30 offers from different schools, and when we went around to these schools, one of the things that I saw was that was that the kids themselves, when you say, well, what do you think about going to Deion? I asked my boy that when he was in high school, and they won the championship. This team had won the Georgia State Championship and was number 3 in the country. I said, son, what do you think about going? Because Deion's doing some work over there. He said, Dad, I hear all of that, but I ain't with that. I can't get the type of exposure. I can't get the type of training and access to the facilities that we need. So what Deion is banking on is the fact that these kids are black. And they come from a culture that when they go to a stadium and there's 60,000 black folks and families in that stadium watching them play, that's a whole different vibe than when my boy goes to Morgantown and there's 70,000 white folks sitting there singing Country Roads. You see what I'm saying? And so I agree with the brother Hiram about in his final conclusion, and what he was saying, that it is about organized. It is about these kids getting paid. It is about them having a union. And it is about them being recognized, because going to work as a student athlete is a job. That ain't no joke. I can't even talk to my boy for weeks because he ain't got no time. You see, and so it's a job, and they do need to get the benefits from it. I think the NIL, the name, image, and likeness, and being able to go into the portal and choose where you want to go is a big step forward, because before the NIL, these kids were taken for granted completely. Now coaches got to pander to them to make sure that they don't push that button and leave the next year after they done cultivated them. A lot is at stake now. So I think the Deion coming along with the HBCU is providential. I think it's really meaningful. Whether he wants to move on or not to another school, that's neither here nor there. I think that the major thing that Deion is showing is that the class nature of HBCUs has been stultified, has been completely insular and rigid, and they have not focused on creating a new generation of Black youth who believe that whatever they do, when then they go out and do it, that they should dominate it, that they should control, that we should control our own resources, that we should control our own community, that we should control even our own facilities that produce water, that give us water. And I think that when you break it down like that, you'll see whatever the limitations of Deion's personality may have. Personalities are necessary for in historical moments. Certain personalities were meant to be there at a certain point in time, whether we want to call it a spiritual, divine intervention or whatever. Russia, Soviet Union wouldn't have won the war without Stalin. Okay, we need to understand that whatever faults he may have, and I use that as an analogy because I think the HBCUs have produced generations of bootlickers. I think they've produced generations of intellectuals and academics who are not about the struggle and empowerment of Black people, but instead about their own class and caste and fraternity interests, you know, and
So,
that's what we have.
That point, sticking with that point right there. Let's say Deion is successful in the next couple years. He's able to pull some of the top recruits. The commercials are coming. They're putting these schools on ESPN. They're putting them on NBC, CBS on Saturday afternoon, right? And the millions are coming in. Given what you just said about HBCUs, class contradictions, right? The class composition, the class contradictions of HBCUs historically, and for the fact of the matter, universities are nothing but class training programs anyway.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
What tells us, what makes us believe, leads us to believe that through Deion Sanders, right, and what he's trying to do with the football programs, that somehow that's going to have some sort of revolutionary change or radical shift over what these institutions are there to produce in the first place, which is this talented 10th mentality, right? Because I push back and say, I do believe that HBCUs prepare Black folks, and I'm not saying that they're just purely like, pushing out a misleadership class. A lot of brilliant and amazing people come out of HBCUs historically and continue to do so, right? And so I don't want to just solely put it there. But they're universities, first and foremost. And universities also, like football teams, only care about the profit. They are not that invested, right, in the individuals, and they play according to the order of the day, the system, right, that we live under. And so what is the likelihood, right, that you are banking on, or it seems like you're banking on, that Deion is going to be able to cause some sort of radical shift in the politics of these institutions through their football teams? That's where I don't line up, right? Where we're talking about, and yes, and we can tout pro-Black and we can tout all this, right? And a lot of folks who use that same language and say that we need our own independent institutions, our own organizations, our own banks, our own this, our own that, while still pushing Black capitalism, while still pushing a political misleadership. And this is where I feel like the Deion thing, because we get so caught up in the bravado in what he brings in a lot of this messaging, and it's positive messaging. I don't doubt that Deion doesn't care about his boys and all the boys who play at HBCUs. I don't doubt that, right? But Deion is a football player. Deion is an entertainer. Deion is not a theoretician or
well, yeah, but that's where we come in at, and I agree with that, and that's one of the things that Jared was trying to point out. That the intricacies of how the HBCUs are situated in the educational milieu in America is very difficult to just see as overcoming just through a sports program or just through a personality who comes along and who's able to shake up things in passing. I think that although Deion might not be around in the long term to see any type of significant transition in HBCU's relationship to sports, to mainstream sports, because sports in America is a business, and it's part of the capitalist. It's part of the capitalist corporate matrix. I mean, Jared and you perhaps are better situated to point that out and how funds are being raised and used. But as pointed out by both of you, some of these universities are pulling tens of millions of dollars every year because of their sports programs, because of their football programs. And that money is then, or a significant portion of it is then gone into promote the brand of the teams and the university. That process is not happening in the Black universities, in the HBCUs, because they're not pulling in that type of money. But as was pointed out, I think that you pointed it out earlier, that in the beginning, when the HBCUs were independent, a lot of players were getting drafted into the NFL straight from the HBCUs. They didn't have no NIL portal. They didn't have no instant replay highlights, and all of that stuff. They was getting drafted straight up on talent. I mean, Eddie Robinson, the original Eddie Robinson, was at one time the winningest coach in football, bar none. I mean, I think Nick Saban was still an assistant coach probably back then. You see, he was the winningest coach in football, and that's what brought the NFL to look at his teams. You know, it's the same thing with the Negro baseball league. You remember all of the players in the Negro baseball league who would have lit up the major baseball league, but they never had a chance. But all of the major league scouts used to go to these black games and see the Satchel Pages and see the talent and try to steal them away to Jackie Robinson and ease them into the major leagues. I mean, the first black player that played in the South at the height of the so-called civil rights movement, at the height of desegregation, he went to Alabama. You know, and the coach, straight up racist, said, look, man, you know, we need these boys to win. I mean, I think Hiram knows better than I do the history of how blacks had to struggle just to get into a quarterback position. We know that was the same thing in basketball. We know that when Dr. J made a move, it was athletic, and when Larry Bird made a move, it was cerebral. It was, oh, he knows the game, and he's, you know, and Larry Bird is the greatest that ever did it because he's a student of the game, but Dr. J was just an athlete. You see. And so we know that these tropes are being broken down right now as we speak by what's going on. That's why.
And before there was Will Smith, there was Dr. J.
That's right.
Punching somebody in the mouth in the floor.
I mean, yeah, because
I'm just saying, he and Larry Bird had a famous fight, and then it became a video game that for some of us of a certain generation, it meant a lot to. And I literally never played Larry Bird's character on my Commodore.
Well, I can't stand anything that came out of Boston, you know. And I mean, that's been me. You know, I'm from New York, so I hated everything that came out of Boston. You know,
can I because I think I feel like I have a lot to say, and I disagree, unfortunately, with a lot. But I wanted to sort of break up my two speaking parts, break up my speaking into two parts. One would be this one, where I would like to just show a little bit of an article here to give us and our audience a little more context to what we're talking about. I think it's a pretty strong article, HBCUs at the Financial and Competitive Crossroads of College Sports, from the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education from February of this year, Dr. Al Tony Gilmore. I'll make sure the link is in the show description if it isn't already, but there's just a couple of things from this that I just wanted to go over to give some more context, and then I'd be happy to hear what each of you has to say. And then in my next commentary segment, I'll offer my responses. But in 1968, the National Urban League sponsored the Morgan State and Grambling game, only a few months after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., which attracted a crowd of over 60,000 to New York's Yankee Stadium. Sports writer Bill Rhoden remembered, quote, "Somebody said it was the beginning of the beginning, but it was the beginning of the end." In many ways, he was correct, because it was also the time when the predominantly white colleges and universities first began to aggressively recruit black athletes. Following the 1970 defeat of the segregated University of Alabama team by an integrated University of Southern California team led by an all-black backfield in a nationally televised game, former University of Maryland coach Jerry Claiborne famously said that the game did more for integration in Alabama in 60 minutes than Martin Luther King Jr. did in 20 years. That game marked the opening of the floodgates for the recruiting of black athletes, though a leak in the dam had occurred in 1966 when Texas Western College, now University of Texas El Paso, with an all-black starting lineup, won the NCAA basketball title by defeating an all-white University of Kentucky team. But what those two games meant for the future of athletics at predominantly white institutions was the direct opposite of what they ordained for HBCU athletics. They launched the former on an upward trajectory and caused a downward spiral for the latter, much more pronounced in the revenue-generating sports of football and basketball, which largely fund all non-revenue-generating collegiate athletics. Since that time, money has come to totally define the operation of NCAA-sanctioned college sports, and the monopoly of HBCUs once had on the best of black athletes is a distant memory of the past. The schools with the best athletes make more money than the schools without them, and the best Black athletes have overwhelmingly chosen PWIs with Power 5 and mid-major schools since the early 1970s. Those schools with superior resources provide wider exposure for the talented student athletes. That was just some of the context. There's obviously more here that talks about the arrangement of the leagues that Hiram sort of already went over. We can come back to that as well. There's discussion of where the money goes that I'd like to maybe come back to as part as well. And then sort of what Dhoruba was talking about here, some of the budgetary differences that are seen here. Many HBCUs with a lower division, as well as lower division schools, have athletic budgets of around $4.5 million. In some cases, the salaries of a Power 5 conference coach is more than that. And larger MEAC and SWAC schools have budgets of 10 to 14 million. By comparison, higher division PWIs have over $100 million budgets. So there's a huge discrepancy. Now, here's just some of what Deion was talking about, what teams are paid to take these kinds of beatings. Several years ago, Howard University lost its first 2 games of the season by a combined score of 118-0, 76-0 loss to Boston College. South Carolina State lost to Clemson 59-0 and received a check for $300,000. Dell State 79-0 for for $500,000. Prairie View 67-0, $450,000. Morgan State lost to Marshall 62-0, and on and on and on and on it goes. Howard lost to Maryland 62-0 a couple of years ago. And then they talk about the $400 million annual revenue of the NCAA. That's the sort of pot that everybody is trying to get a piece of. I think we've already covered some of that, the transfers. Anyway, so that I just wanted to give some added additional context. But Hiram, Dhoruba, any response or thoughts on any of that? Anything more you wanted to say on any of that? And then there's some things that I would like to, I'll come back to whenever after.
One question that I have with the money, because I'm not against HBCU schools getting money. Using football teams as an avenue to do that is nothing new. It's what all the schools do. Unfortunately, in this country, right, sports rules over academics, right? And so folks use these football teams as revenue generators, like I said, to pay for classes, to pay for a lot of the other sports, women's sports, and some of the other sports like tennis and golf at the universities comes from football money as well. Libraries come from football money. It's just the unfortunate reality in this capitalist bourgeois state that we live in. The thing that stands out for me, and the question I have, is that HBCU football is much more than what happens on the field. And oftentimes what happens on the field is not even the reason why folks go to HBCU games, right? And Deion is definitely trying to change that by putting a better product on the field, so they don't have these shellackings that they end up suffering against these bigger schools, right? But let's say that the HBCU, let's say Howard and FAMU, Southern, Grambling, right? They all start making $60 million as well, right? These institutions become much more wealthy. How does that change the culture that makes HBCU football? The band, the dancing, right? The classics. A big piece, right, that gets left out here is that a lot of this money also gets made in these bowl games. And these schools are chasing national championships, and they're chasing these bowl games. That's what gives them their notoriety. The Cotton Bowl, the Rose Bowl, the Citrus Bowl, right? All of these. The FCS, so the lower division in which the HBCUs sit in the SWAC and the MEAC, have their own playoff systems with their own bowls. But the HBCUs don't play for those national championship games, right? They don't enter the college football playoff system in the FCS because they have their own bowls, right? Their own classics is what they call it, right?
Well,
the Celebration Bowl, the Heritage Bowl, right? These different classics
but
bring in revenue. So real quick, so my concern is, and this brings alumni, this brings Black folks, and again, we're talking about most of this is happening below the Mason-Dixon. up north, right, the HBCU isn't really a thing, and HBCU football isn't really a thing. So for me, then, how does that change the culture, right? The long-standing culture of HBCU football, which are these classics, which are the bands and the dances, which makes it black and separates it from the PWIs. Once all this corporate money starts coming in, once all of this stuff,
well, I think
and the exploitation of players,
I think that's a non-issue, because black folks have been since the bullwhip days believe that we have a right to party. It's a constitutional right for us to party. So we'll party, you know, when the media when the media is hurling towards Earth, we'll be out boogieing and partying. You could believe that. Okay, so having more money is only going to make the HBCU bands and stuff better. They already the best bands and best marching bands in the country, bar none, with no money. And that's just because black people like the boogie. That's because that's what we do. You see, so you know, Grambling's marching band will beat USC's marching band any day in the week. You understand, in terms of choreography, in terms of difficulty of performance, and all of that stuff. So I don't think more money is going to change the culture. I think it's going to make the culture more. I would say vibrant, but we know what we. Yeah, I mean, but what I'm saying is, look at what has happened. What has happened with what defense department is getting ready to do. I think Jared knows about that. They're looking at black colleges to deduct much more money than the football team can get on weapons research, on biological engineering. So they want to put us all down with the military industrial complex and give us a bag. And we're supposed to. So is that going to change the culture of the marching bands? And I mean, if more money comes from the NSA and doing research, is Grambling marching band going to get less black? I don't think so. So I think that's a red herring. I think the black culture will always arise to express each generation's take on whether it's music, on whether it's dance, or whatever. And, you know, like an OG, you know, I might not appreciate, you know, Little Squirt and Little Uzi right now, and I might not think they have much talent. But hey, I'm an OG, man. The young generation is buying millions of their records and making them millionaires. So what's my opinion matter? So I don't think more money for the university is actually going to change black culture in the sense, in the performance sense. Now, it might redirect it politically and become more reactionary, much like Hollywood has done black actors. You know, I mean, and we got to understand too that as a national minority, we're the only people that have sports figures that are spokesmen for us on political issues. You know, the media goes to basketball players and football players to get their opinion on what black folks' position should be on voting rights or some other political issue. The athlete doesn't say, well, look, you know, I donate to such and such organization and I accept their, you know, and I try to do work with them. Why don't you ask the leader of that organization about this issue, not me? I'm a basketball player. You see, and I think the athletes and celebrities really don't know their place in this capitalist society, and how it could undermine real black development, real sovereign thinking for people of African ancestry. But I do agree with what Brother Hiram is saying, or what he's implying, is that the way that the conferences are arranged is like we already on the outside looking in, and they ain't trying to let us in, you know. And but I think that's starting to change, because I know the SEC is getting teams from California are going to join the SEC. The FCS is changing. All of these things are changing, and that's mainly because of the portal situation too. You know, and all of this has to do with contracts, with media contracts, with ESPN contracts, with rivalries in college school, because college football is much more vibrant and dynamic than professional football. You know,
this is part of my point why I asked about the band stuff, right? Because there's a whole systemic shift that is happening in college football, right? And so what is happening with these media deals, right? You brought the SEC, the Big Ten, is that these super conferences are being created.
Mm-hmm.
New media deals are coming in. The Big Ten schools, so all the schools in the Midwest, again, the Ohio States, the Michigan States, the Minnesotas, all of them, right? Signed a 7-year, $7 billion deal, right? With who was it? ABC, I believe. Each of those universities are about to make $100 to $120 million a year.
That's not counting the bowl games. That's not counting the bowl offers.
The SEC schools, the Alabamas, the Tennessees, the Floridas, right? They're making a little less than $1 billion under their new negotiated contract with ESPN. What is happening now with these mega conferences, you said the regional alignment is all over, right? They're going to be forcing boys from California to hop on planes, fly all the way over to the East Coast to play a game, to then fly back across country to then make sure they're in class on Monday and in workouts all day.
That's where these Thursday night games are starting to pop up.
Right. The toll that's going to take on these boys' bodies is going to be incredible because of the bag. But what's also happening is that the Big Ten, the ACC, and the SEC, the three major conferences in the Power Five, right, where you're trying to shrink it down to the Power Three, are already in negotiations about removing themselves from the NCAA altogether. And for those who don't know, the NCAA is the governing body for all college sports, right? What football is going through is its own gilded age, right? If we think about the robber barons of this country back in the 1920s with the railroads and all that, football is going through that moment right now. And they are rebuilding and recrafting the system as a whole, where ultimately these schools want to sever themselves from the governing body, which is a racket in and of itself, right, of the NCAA. But what does that mean? That means that all the sports, from women's sports to all the sports that are not football, will then fall under the jurisdiction of football teams and football coaches and football players, right? Which I mean, we're talking about the regulations of how much time can be allotted for a young person to spend on practice, the regulations around helmet-to-helmet contact hits, the concussion protocols, all that will now be regulated by these football teams themselves, as opposed to this governing body, right? Which for me is madness, right? It's crazy. We're talking about the extraction of labor from these boys' bodies. When we're talking about Black bodies specifically, right? Then that for me is frightening. The other piece is, when I was mentioning about the HBCUs, is that once they start making this money that Deion wants to bring in, all these things like the classics, all of the classics, which makes them, right, will have to go, because they'll be forced into a system where they're going to have to play for national championships. They're going to have to play the North Dakota State universities. They're going to have to play the Buffaloes. They're going to have to play these schools in this college football season, in this college football system. Right now, the reason they don't play in those college football playoffs is because the scheduling doesn't line up. And for HBCUs right now, playing in the Heritage Bowl and the Celebration Bowl brings in way more revenue than it does playing in the FCS college football playoff. But once they become up at these levels of these institutions, and with this new system that's being created, they're going to have to make a choice. Do you schedule these college playoffs, right, and play these teams because now you're at this level where you want it to be? Or do you still hold on to the classics that made you for so long? Because those two things can't coexist at the same time. And the decision is going to have to be made. And what Deion and them is trying to say is that cash rules everything around, right? And ultimately, money is going to be king, is going to be decided. And then therefore, that is definitely going to have an impact. Black folks are going to boogie, absolutely. But you're going to lose, again, continue to erode away, right? Because we have this erosion of what HBCU football is. The last thing that I'll say is, for me, is the other thing is, these schools are state schools, HBCU schools, right? These schools, universities, they're already underfunded, grossly underfunded, hanging by a thread, right? And folks are not talking about, we're talking about football teams, we're talking about sports like we do with Ohio State, like we do with the Notre Dames and all that, right? But we're not talking about, and Deion wants that money to go strictly to the football programs, but what happens to these institutions that are already hanging by a thread? And once you put them under the control and the rule of the dollar that's coming from Nike, that's coming from Reebok, that's coming from all of them, what impact is that going to have on these institutions, right? Now, yes, granted, they produce a misleadership class like all universities do, especially those terrorism training camps that they call Ivy League schools, right? But they still also produce a lot for our young people, right? Why is there no conversation about how can we generate that money back into these schools to lower the tuition so more of our brothers and sisters can enter these universities where they're already locked out from the PWIs because of those rising tuitions, right? How come we're not having that conversation right there? How come we're not having the conversation?
Well, I think
politics of these institutions and who comes out, so they're not continuing with the boule practices that
I want to jump in on that. I think you're absolutely right, Hiram. Why aren't we having that conversation? You know, and I agree with that. You know, I think that this also dovetails into the fact that Black people don't have an independent political party. We do not think as a sovereign people. And because of that, we don't put our interests first whenever it comes to the electoral political system, or even when it comes to being entrepreneurs and Black capitalists. We don't really put our
message.
Sorry, Dhoruba, I couldn't help that one. Sorry about that. Just
I think that what Hiram is pointing out is definitely a spoiler alert. You know, for if we're just talking about it's all about the money. You see what I'm saying? It's also about understanding the roots of the HBCUs. The roots of the HBCUs came out of the fact that after Reconstruction, that Black people could not get into the mainstream colleges. They were banned from that. We had no systems of higher education. We had beefs between those who were abolitionists and believed that we should abolish the mercantile system that enslaved us, and those who said that we should be, you know, we should just get vocational training and just, you know, go along to get along, you know, fit in where we can get in, you know, and this all comes from the fact that after Reconstruction, citizenship was forced on African people. Basically, we had no sense. There was no referendum on what we wanted to do, and that hits. And so the institutions that have come out of this segregated and what I call domestic colonization is why the HBCUs are where they at today. You know, and I'm not saying that as Hiram pointed out, many of forward-looking academicians and Black minds and professionals came out of HBCUs, you know, and contributed to the African diaspora's experience in this country. And I don't mean in a negative way, you see, but what has happened is when over time we want to be safe. You know, I think if we go back and read the Black Bourgeoisie by E. Franklin Fraser, that we could see the roots of this problem in the HBCUs when he's talking about how we got a Black middle class that really has no power, that really doesn't exercise the economic and political power of a historical middle class. You know?
Message.
This Jared, man, I don't stop messing with you, man.
I just want to throw a little exclamation point on your.
No, but I think Hiram is making a good point. What is going to come out of this? What is going to come out of this realignment, and where are we going to be in this process? And yeah. The bigger picture of where sports is going. I don't think it's just football. You know, I think we saw this when the women's soccer team won international acclaim, and the women came out talking about they ain't getting the same pay as men and not the same recognition and all of this. And now, you know, there's been announcements from FIFA and all of them. The women's soccer players are going to get the same rate, the same pay. So now it's negotiating.
So, but Dhoruba, if I may, this would be a good, I think, a good moment for me to jump in, because that's sort of my point, and where I think a lot of what Deion is doing is being misunderstood, and why a lot of his classmates are in agreement with him, like Roland Martin and others. A lot of the Black capitalists, particularly entrepreneurial media class. That's why he was on Earn Your Leisure the other day, and I did watch a majority of that interview.
What did you think about that? What did you think about that interview?
So my point is, so to draw the parallel, the women what the women ended up fighting for and what they won was a bigger piece of the collective pie created by all the money that soccer generates, men, women, et cetera, and so forth. And because they were winning so much and way more than the men, they had a bigger platform to stand on to make their point. But my point is, ultimately, all they were advocating for was a greater portion of the pie. What Deion is advocating for ultimately, again, is just more of the ad revenue that is generated by college football. He's not advocating anything momentous or radical, and in fact, I think he's taking a very legit issue.
Well, what would you consider? What I hear that I could hear that, because I could see that I don't look at Deion as a revolutionary figure, or a revolutionary activist. So I wouldn't expect for him to do that. However, that doesn't mean that in a particular situation, one who advocates even moderate change can be seen as radical reformation. But I'm really interested in what you thought about that interview, Jared. Because I kind of like agree with you, and I definitely agree with what Brother Hiram was saying about the possible outcome of these new contracts but what I think is what I wanted was from you though, Jared, was what you thought about that interview.
So, right, I'm gonna get there, but so this is what is missed in all of this again is what I think. And why I want to do this is why I wanted to host this conversation, and why I want us to have sports more broadly discussed on this platform, and why I humbly disagree with those who disagree with me, like those in the chat, like Sister Emma, all due respect. Like, these are not frivolous topics. And to Norman Henderson's comment a little while ago, Dhoruba is the one that got at me over this. I didn't drag Dhoruba into this. So like Dhoruba is very interested in this discussion. So don't put it all on me.
I'm the guilty party.
No, but they were saying that with all due respect, like if they were like, people like, why is Jared making Dhoruba, slum himself? And I'm like, it's not my fault.
Whoa.
But
Who
my
said
point
that?
though, Norman it was one of the people in the rebate a little while ago. It was just a comment about, it was just saying like Dhoruba looked bored or something. Like, here we go. Like, Dhoruba seems uninterested in this foolishness. And what I'm saying is, this is not foolishness. In the proper setting, much can be revealed in what's going on here. That's why I think what we're doing here is important.
I think the brother. That's why I wanted the brother Hiram to go first.
Right. That's why I'm saying.
And he laid it right out. Some things I disagreed with him on, but only in terms of dimension and significance. But overall, what he's talking about has massive implications for a lot of young kids that's coming up to go into college.
So this is what I'm saying is being missed here. So this is another one of these, I think, fake crowd-pleasing arguments that people can get applause points off of, like, again, like with buying power and other popular concepts that give people this symbol, this mirage of radicalism, but they're really not. And it doesn't expose what is, again, the colonial relationship that we have in general, and that HBCUs reflect in the higher academic or higher academic world, or educational world, whatever they want to call it. So it is the perfect colonial model in the sense that the best players, so going back into the history of the HBCUs in sports, the best players, of course, while they were playing at HBCUs, could individually be plucked into the NFL and whatever, but they were not going to be paid until they entered or mined and entered the colonial apparatus that is professional sports, or later on, as we are now, into higher level PWI dominated sports spaces. So in other words, if you stay at an HBCU, you're not going to be allowed to make the money. You're not going to be allowed to get the recognition that you would get in these higher stages, because that is the colonial relationship. You're not of any value to the colonizer while you are sort of left in your natural resource state. So what gives them value is when they can be plucked to play for a professional team or a bigger university. So that's one thing. Given the ad revenue relationship that all of this works around, Morgan State plays in Division I and has a 10,000 seat arena. So unless you start booking games at Raven Stadium, there's not going to be ad revenue. You could pack every seat in there. you're not going to get enough attention that's going to make Adidas and then want to pay the ad rates, et cetera, and so forth. And then once the bigger PWIs, just as any colonial relationship would recognize, once PWIs saw that, wait, if I'm Nebraska and Alabama and UCLA, and all of a sudden my best recruits are going to some HBCU, that's not going to sit. That's not going to sit well. That's going to kick into activism all of the boosters and all of the financial and political apparatus that get involved to cut that off and make sure these players end up where the colonial apparatus needs them to end up. The last thing I'll say, at least for now, is that when it comes to this naming and image licensing rights, the one thing that Deion said in that Earn Your Leisure interview that I thought was of value to us is that he said the correct point and then took it in the wrong way analytically or for interpretation, which was that Black players at HBCUs do not, as I was just saying, get the exposure to make having control over their naming and image license rights mean anything to them. It only means something if you are known and can turn that into revenue generating. But if you're only stuck at an HBCU where nobody's watching you, nobody's seeing you, it doesn't matter. And what Deion said was that the real reason they gave over and allowed for the NIL to take place was so that the rich boosters at rich white universities could now legally funnel their money to their favorite athletes to make sure they end up at those PWIs. Because again, Black people do not have enough money. So again, right around in that same conversation, Deion comes right back around and to blame Black people for not supporting their universities enough, without recognizing that, of course, Black HBCU grads, Black people in general, do not have what white university grads and white people have and cannot give back to these universities at the same rate, even if they wanted to. So then with the NIL making everything legal now, all these super rich white boosters can now fully legally do what they were doing illegally before and just funnel all the money they want to their favorite players and make sure that there's no benefit to going to an HBCU for a player. And then the last point I would just want to make very quickly is that when Deion says the money should go to the football team, it totally disrespects, again, not only the institution itself, but the broader politics of where I and what would want us to be. We need to be focused on not how do we get our better share of the crumb. We need to make sure that no matter what anybody does or doesn't do, we all benefit from everything that is made because we've all already contributed to this wealth that has been created. So instead of saying, let's make more money and then give it only to the football team because they're the ones earning it, what he should be saying is the $400 million that the NCAA is getting is coming wildly out of Black communities' production. All of that money should go back to all of those communities, regardless of where they particularly played a role. Because ultimately, I will stop here, Dhoruba, but I just want to say, but ultimately, coming from the perspective of faculty who actually cares about the intellectual development of students, if the money that is only going to be generated, to Hiram's point, based on the capitalist model of football sports production, and then it goes only to the football team, then what are we doing with the rest of the university? And what are we really saying about these universities? Why don't we just create that league that Hiram is talking about and then cut all this nonsense out and focus on education?
I think that's an oversimplification. Nobody, when you listen to Deion talk to other players and other athletes and to other people that he brought there, if you notice that whole Jackson State University playing field, he basically is the one that raised the money to pay for it. So you have a point. Both you and Hiram have a point about how the larger leagues are able to mobilize their wealth base, those who have money, to bring the players that they want there, and they could generate much more. I think the same rule applies to these Negroes who are intent on getting in Forbes 500 as the most richest Black person on the planet. You have these Black capitalists. They wanted to buy basketball teams, didn't they? Look at what happened in Brooklyn Brooklyn with the NBA. How come all of these Negroes want to buy basketball teams and then none of them want to fund an HBCU team or compete with these young kids? A lot of these young kids coming out the hood would go to a school where they got black swag rather than a white school, but the money ain't there, the exposure ain't there. So I'm saying you got the P. Diddy's, you got these other these knuckleheads with all of this money. I mean, they want to buy football leagues. They got contracts with the NFL to do halftime performances. They want to do all of that with the mainstream thing. So why ain't you hollering at them to match the money to get the type of draftees and the type of athletes to the HBCUs, expand their facilities? I mean, if Jay-Z's a billionaire, I know he ain't never went to college or nothing. I don't think he did. But what's to stop him from putting this chump change 500 million, you understand, or 200 million into a 70,000 seat stadium for Morgan? That means Morgan got to play a 70,000 seat stadium game. And the money that's generated for that, I don't think any football team out there thinks the money that they're getting should just go to the football program and just go to football players and F the rest of the university and the faculty. I don't think that's
well, he did say that. Well, Deion did say that. And that's sort of my point about what it forgets, because what it leaves out, it's just sort of like what I'm saying about at the macro level about the nation. The gross domestic product, that $20 trillion pot, instead of fighting over who should have what based on ownership and labor, it should be we've all created that wealth, so we should all benefit from it more or less equally. Absolutely. So the same thing here. That when Deion, because he said it multiple times, that the football team should get the money because they're the one putting the risk and putting in the work and the one generating the money. But he leaves out just about again how an economy works. What about the grant money that faculty bring in? What about the awards that faculty and student bring in? What about the tuition that students pay? What about
obviously none of that money went to the football team. So
obviously it does. Wait a minute. It didn't. If you got a 10,000 stadium and you getting grant money and all, ain't none of that went to the football team. If you in a locker room with roaches and rats, ain't none of that went to the football team. That's Dhoruba, that's not true. But it is true, Dhoruba. My point though is that you could say the stadiums and the locker rooms are substandard. You could say that about dorms, as was the case at Howard recently, and so on and so forth. But my point is the money that pays for all of that, I'm not saying it's used properly. I'm not saying, but the money but I'm saying when Deion says it all comes that football does. It ignores what the rest of the university does to contribute to all of that. It ignores the fact that we are there.
But that's what you're there for. But I don't think that's what he's saying. I'm thinking what he's saying. He's saying. I think this is what I get from him saying. This is a transitory period, and he says that what he's going through doesn't mean that what we're going through right now is supposed to be the end product. Okay, I don't think that what he means is that if Jackson State started making $150 million a year every season, all the money is going to go into the football program and the rest of the school like F y'all. That's not what he means, and I don't think he means that, because I heard him say on plenty of occasions that a better performing team, a team that feels more confident about themselves, can bring that type of attitude to the rest of the university, and they should, and they have to share. And it's not just sharing attitude here. You're right. You're absolutely right. How the hell are you going to have a football team if they started going to the Rose Bowl and they're getting 150 million and 200 million a year just to show up at a bowl game? How's all of that money going to go into the 53 players or 100 players on the football team, and the rest of the school is like, hey man, F y'all, y'all got to get it yourself.
But my real point in that, though, Dhoruba, is that, again, it ignores the political economy of sports and the relationship HBCUs have to it. There is that even with what he's able to do at Jackson, that's based on, so a lot of what I hear him saying is based on his exceptional experience. And this is what often happens with people who are successful in business or athletics or whatever. They and why they're not good coaches in many cases. I'm glad to see it's not the same with him. They expect that everybody can perform the way they did. or do what they
But you're
did.
supposed to have
So-
that expectation, even in the
But
black
the-
movement.
but-
I expect your academics like you to perform the way that your icons. In
He
history.
stood up on us, Hiram. He stood up on us,
Yeah,
Hiram.
you
I
need
see
to.
you, D.
Yeah, you
I'm
got
just
to.
saying.
Y'all got to follow that too.
But
He
D, but
flexed
when
a
you're
little bit
offering,
too. He
he
flexed.
did, I know. But when you're offering your honest and most objective analysis, you will also recognize that the times are different, that the conditions aren't the same, right? So that's all I'm saying. That's all I mean by that. Deion has to recognize that after 20 years or whatever, after retirement, he still has a top 10 40 time. You understand what I'm saying? So he performed at a level that almost no other human can ever perform at. And then he's looking down at the rest of us regulars as an alien or whatever.
I know
I
know these kids right now. I know these kids right now that's in the portal, that's in the mix, that's gonna break that record, sitting on the sidelines.
But my point is, But Dhoruba, my point is we shouldn't have to produce somebody who can run a 4.240 so that we can have a football team or a college or a community or a job. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying.
What you saying? We should produce somebody that runs a 5.7
what I'm saying is
because he's waving the red, black, and green flag.
No, what I'm saying is the one who runs a 4.2 is helping produce wealth that helps the one who doesn't even play have a great life and vice versa. That's what I'm saying. And what I feel like
what's happening.
No, it's not. It's not happening.
Why not?
It's not happening because again, and we haven't even gotten to the colonial relationship of the institution. So even when all this money comes into the HBCU, where does it end up going? Morgan State again is a public institution. Anyone can go look up everybody's salary.
But we know where it's going because they kicked you out your office and you didn't even know it. So we know where it's going. You came to your office one day and there was a different sign on the door. Somebody was sitting in there with their feet up on the desk, and you was like, do I got the wrong spot here? And the administration had said, oh, my bad. We should have told you last night. You understand?
They sure did.
We know where the money's going.
Jerry, real quick.
Yeah,
I think I find it, and I don't want to delve into conspiracy theory, but the timing of all this, right, also has to be taken into account. And so there's two things that have come up. One, the NIL, the name, image, and likeness deals, where it says that young athletes in the NCAA are now allowed to get paid contracts for commercials based off their name, image, and likeness, which came after a decades-long fight over these young athletes not being able to be paid, while institutions, the universities themselves were getting paid from jersey sales, ticket sales, video game sales, and all of that. But why did that happen? Because the unionization movement kept growing and growing stronger and stronger and stronger, right? Where the National Labor Relations Board even said that football players are university employees and should be paid as such. Then the university pops up, the NCAA pops up, says, okay, chill, give them NIL deals. Some of you, the Deion Sanders, who run their 4.240s. And remember, Jared, right? Back when Deion ran his 40 and Tims. Right?
Oh, damn. I forgot about that part.
Deion ran his 40 and Tims. Right. But these exceptional athletes are able to make millions of dollars at 18 years old before they even set foot on a college football field. But that was to undermine the movement that was growing to organize and unionize as a part of this union busting across the country itself, right? College football. Because again, understanding to Jerry's point that the reason these institutions, the Ohio States, the Notre Dames, the Miamis, are so profitable, so big time, is because they are factories into the NFL, right? That grinds up these athletes, that extracts as much they can from these black bodies and then toss them to the side. We see the brother Tua, right, collapsing on the field two games in a row, right, dying before our eyes for the sake of millions of dollars. That's what makes them profitable. If you can channel these boys and these black bodies up into professional ranks to keep making these corporations and these businesses billions of dollars. And so they hit them with the NIL to stump the unionizing movement, right? After the Labor Relations Board said these are employees. The other thing is Deion busts on the scene. Now we have this heightened visibility of HBCU football, right after these George Floyd protests, right after this uprising around police violence.
Well, you
right,
really
and
into conspiracy theories.
police violence. We all know that sports are used as an escapism. They're used to drive our minds, our attention, or everything away from what really needs to be the fight that we need to be fighting. So instead of having a conversation, instead of Deion being like, you know what, I love my boys so much, right? And I don't want them getting killed out, because Deion's not going to talk about the police. Deion's not going to talk about the defense contracts that go to Howard University. Deion's not going to talk about all of those things, because Deion knows where his own paycheck comes from, right? And he's not going to instill that in his boys, because he wants them to go back up to that meat grinding factory known as the National Football League, right? But we can't remove those two things, that when the country is going through this national uprising and the streets are on fire and cop cars are being burned down all over the place, right? Now that energy has shifted off into a whole bunch of other different stuff. And
Well, wait a minute,
HBCU,
hold on,
college football.
D, before you respond, let me just respect the super chat here real quick. Kepper Ross says the issue with money in college athletics is further complicated by the Brett Favre incident and the corruption of capitalist exploitation of poor communities to the benefit of these big institutions. Thank you for the super chat, and you're right. Yeah,
I think Hiram's absolutely right in pointing out. But this feature of encapsulation of Black movements and Black energy has been going on long before the NIL came along. Sports was always that avenue, was always that venue to undermine. So this ain't nothing unique. However, what you're pointing out about how the NIL has come along after the protest, the 5 years at least of athletes protesting, some of them going on strike, trying to form unions, and being knocked out in the court saying that they were students, that they weren't. The NIL can be seen as an appeasement for that. This gets me to my whole point from the beginning. We don't understand our radical history and our radical traditions, and therefore we reinvent failure when we don't understand it. We've already fought this fight and we won it. Okay, we already won it. When we already had fought this fight. Remember when we was talking about how historically the NFL used to pick Black players out of the HBCU straight away. Okay, and with the coming of these new regional and leagues and contracts and stuff, that we just became cannon fodder. We just became a plantation, like Jared pointed out, to produce players to go up into the big house of the NFL. But we can't lose we can't lose sight of the fact that domestic colonization is what typifies the powerlessness of Black people in the United States, and our denial of that fact, that we are essentially a domestic colony, that African people in the United States have been colonized in a unique and a unique way, means that all of the institutions that come out of that colonization are reflect that relationship. And I think Jared was pointing that out. Hiram is pointing that out, which means that Deion Sanders has limited use value. Okay, he has limited use value, and as we as revolutionaries and we as people who understand the ebb and flow of history should understand, just like Hiram pointed out, and I teased him. I said, "Oh, you're on some conspiracy theory stuff." Well, just because you got a conspiracy theory don't mean it's wrong. You see what I'm saying? And he's I think, but because encapsulation is a strategy of institutions, and to encapsulate the energy and the vitality of HBCUs has always been part of the game. Has always been. They picked our doctors and heart surgeons out of HBCUs and put them in the major medical institutions, and he has to tell us as he's writing his memoirs. Oh, I went to Morgan State Medical School. Oh yeah. That's how you got started, and you got a Pulitzer Prize or whatever for.
But see, Dhoruba, this is what I would like to see to reflect the understanding of your what you're saying here. I would like to see. I just did the math here. If Black people are supposed to be 14%, and then we could double that if we expand the diaspora to Latin America, et cetera. But if just at 14% of 400 million, if I'm reading this correctly, what is this number here? Is this 1,
56
2,
million.
3, 1, 2, 3. Is that 56 million? Okay, so
Yeah.
$56 million. So my point would be 14% of the 400 million annual revenue of the NCAA should just go to HBCUs without them having to play 1 second of a game.
I'm with that. I'm with that.
So but that would be my point. But see, but that level of, I think, argumentation gets cut off by the presentation of this problem by people like Deion and Roland Martin.
Absolutely.
And others. So that's
absolutely.
all. So that's
but
why.
Jared,
all I'm saying is that's why I wanted us to have this conversation.
But this is why we are having this conversation.
No, I know. I'm just saying.
The same way we do understand the value of why the enemy is waging, quote, culture wars with us right now. How they trying to redefine the slave trade and make it look like it was involuntary, involuntary migration. You know, and choice, I mean, we know, and all of us know the power of definitions, and in order to rationalize and justify where you're at. I think Deion Sanders has complete limitations when it comes to dealing with what we're talking about. This is not his role. Taking it to this level, his role, what I see, his role right now, given his notoriety and given the way he could bring attention to a team and his coaching style, I think his role, however limited it is to start kicking the lock in the door. Is to start kicking the door. And now there's other people that got to come through this door. There's things that's going to happen with the HBCU vis-a-vis the major conferences that's going to change everything. And I think it's going to happen in the next 2 years. And it's going to be a result of this contradiction. It's up to you. It's up to brothers like Hiram. It's up to people who have this analysis and this understanding of the business of sports and capitalism and white supremacy, on how those forces come together to exploit our youth, to misdirect our educational systems, and to cut us out of the pie. I think that the overview that Jared just pointed out is going to be my new mass line. You know, if we should get this cut of the pie straight away. I'm into sports reparations. You understand? I'm in the sports reparations. You understand? The combine, as everybody's trying to point out, is to try your buck farm. You know, let's see if your buck could run faster than my buck. You understand what I'm saying? And yeah, we could characterize all of that. Give us our bag straight away.
No,
thanks, Megan, for the super chat.
I'm with that part. But I think that Deion could play a role here. I know that Deion is a born-again Christian, that he believes that he's on a mission from God.
Oh yeah,
you know.
He said God called him collect, and he took
and God and law and I'm a Muslim, and I know the law raises those up in certain times to fight those battles and those struggles that need to be fought. You see, and in the Quran it tells you, if those who are hungry, those who are suffering, those who are in prison, those who are exploited, who would defend them if not but you? So I'm with Deion kicking the door in. You know, I don't know if it's a mission I don't know if he's on Jesus's a divine mission, but I do know that the door has to be kicked in. And I think that what Brother Hiram and you were talking about, now that the door is being crunched, now we got to bring the politics to this. We got to step to him. We got to step to those in the HBCU and say, yeah, you know, y'all have gotten moribund in your class approach to bringing black kids out of here, you know, and we need to make this more dynamic. We don't need to be taking Defense Department money, but if you're gonna take Defense Department money, don't sneeze at football money now. If you're gonna take money from Teledyne and do all of this research, we don't agree with that. The politics of the Deion Sanders has to be interjected. It's not. He's just dealing with it solely, like you said, from the point of view of what his experiences was with the NFL, his connections was with the NFL. And I agree 100% with both of y'all that there's limitations to that. And that those limitations he can be co-opted. He can be encapsulated, and that energy taken into a whole different direction that's not beneficial to the young black kids that's coming up in the HBCU.
And for me,
Hiram, let me just, I'm sorry, let me just read
yeah.
this super chat. I just want to appreciate, thank you, Megan. We can't fully comprehend racism without an anti-ableist lens, and we can't dismantle racism without an anti-ableist praxis. This is especially true of anti-Black indigenous racism. T.L. Lewis. Thank you, Megan, for that and for your super chat. Go ahead, Hiram. Thank you. Sorry.
And for me, the politics, right? I think the politics in sports, I love college football, right? I mean, it's one of my guilty pleasures or whatever. But I think that the underlying politics are really important, right? Because they are lined up with the politics of the country, the politics that's ruling over all of us, right? And so if the majority of our boys are over here in the NCAA, then oftentimes I see what Deion is doing as a distraction. If he can pull it off over there, cool. I have no illusions about what the HBCUs will do or produce, right? Because we've already discussed that at length at the beginning of this. But I think, again, this issue of unionization, this issue that college football holds onto this veil of amateurism when it's just nothing but a minor league for the NFL, which has its own State Department contracts, which itself is used to propagate a particular U.S. chauvinism, a projection of masculinity, a projection of United States dominance through its military, but also through its sports in these culture wars across the globe, right? Can't be removed. And the majority of our boys are playing in those institutions, right? Then my concern is for the majority of them, not what Primetime is saying or trying to convince people that he's trying to do for a few of these institutions in the South.
Man, we got to take you on the road. We got to take you on the road internationally, man, so you can challenge FIFA, man.
You said what?
We got to talk about solidarity in international sports as well as political solidarity against fascism.
Right, but for that,
you need to give this wrap up with FIFA.
Right, but we also need political institutions. We also need a politic, right? And so we're getting caught up a lot of times because it's through its media, through its magazines, its news, it's primetime. It's what primetime is doing. It's HBCU football, it's HBCU football, but takes the focus away from, again, the issue of union busting, the issue of unionization, the issue of just the grinding up and the consumption of Black bodies on football fields, right? That then go into propagating this military propaganda and this projection of a very particular U.S. chauvinism and masculinity, right, out on the world stage, and then reinforce through people like Deion, who telling the boys, right, that this is your way through, this is how your way out. If our way out still in 2022 is playing sports, then right, we need something else, right? And we need a battle of ideas, something to counteract that. Because if the loudest voice right now talking about Black athletes and Black sports has now become Deion Sanders, when we went from kneeling on football fields to now it's Deion Sanders to get our piece of the pie, I don't want a piece of that pie, right? That whole table's got to go. This whole thing has to go. You know what I'm saying? And that's what we're not talking about. And I feel like we get caught up in the escapism of sports and the escapism of the stuff and the fun in it, and get caught up in these very things like, well, what's Primetime doing for these athletes and ideas? And we're not talking about the union busting. We're not talking about the complete eradication of a mass movement in 2020 that has been dissipated through electoral politics, through sports athletics, through BS nonprofit activists and stuff, right? We're not talking about that because what we still haven't been able to build is one radical, revolutionary, independent political organizations that can counteract the messaging to these boys that Deion Sanders and the like is saying, and also hold these Black institutions accountable. Because we can have all the Black institutions we want in the world, but without that politic, they're nothing. Like the chairman said, right? They become just neo-colonial institutions here in our community. There's a whole YouTube with Chairman Fred dismantling some brothers in about 3 minutes about this very issue, right? And that gets lost in these conversations when we stay stuck talking about football and what's happening in the game on the field.
Hey, shout out to ZZ Lion Dad. No disrespect, Deion did not run his 40 in Timberlands. That's just folklore. I coach Christian Coleman, one of the fastest person in the world. Okay. Appreciate the super chat. All right. I don't care if Tim's or not.
I think we should really end on Hiram's note. I think that we need to have a sports component to Black Power media. And I think that this young brother needs to come on maybe weekly, once a week. And
message.
Okay. and talk about the impact is, because I wholeheartedly agree with what both of you are saying about the broader implications and applications of this, and how it's getting lost in the sauce when we focus on personalities, or we focus on the smaller micro aspects of it. But I think too that this begins with organization. This begins with a movement, because these kids that's coming up out of high school, and I've been into this for the last 19 years, almost 20 years now. When my boy started throwing, when I first started throwing back shoulder passes to him at 9 years old in Riverdale, and the business of the sport, the politics of this is what Hiram was talking about, and the economics of it, and how it reinforces the whole capitalist system and national security state mentality. That's taken it to a whole nother level. And I don't think that these kids that we need to have this conversation with, that's coming up in junior high school and high school now, can be really brought into this understanding unless we begin to organize those parents in the park, unless we begin to organize those parents on the 12U and 13U. I'm telling you, Jared, when I was with my boys, when he played the different teams, North Henry, the Atlanta Ducks, all of these different teams, I was on the sidelines with parents that I didn't even know up until that point. And come to find out, I'm on the sideline with mamas who are working in the police headquarters, dads who are cops, other ones that's working in the mayor's office, and they boys on the same team as mine. We got this in common. And what this really, I recognize a cop when I see him, because I could almost smell him. So, but even though I'm next to them, we rooting for our kids, and we be jumping, we getting kicked out the park together. You understand? Rooting for our babies, and that opened up a whole new level of conversation where my politics actually got across to people that if I had talked to them outside of the context of this, they wouldn't have heard a word I said. They would have been on some, I'm anti-police, I'm on some, militant, revolutionary stuff that, they trying to raise that the conversation would have went south, but it didn't. And I think that what Hiram is pointing out is very important to broaden our understanding of what's happening to our babies right now coming through this. What does the NIL really mean? How does the NIL function? We need to delve into some of these schools and some of these paymasters who pay for these kids to move to these big powerhouses. We need to trace that money and trace the institutionalization of poverty of that family that kid came from. You see, and how that's a responsibility of public officials that we elected. The whole educational system is trying to be revamped by the right at the grassroots level. And I think that this is really important for parents to understand who have their kids in junior high school and elementary school. We need to address this. Where's your kid coming from that wants this, that's got this NFL dream? It's cool to have that dream, and he's going to follow it, and he's going to try to take his family out of that poverty, but he has to have a class analysis to it. We have to have a class dimension. We can't have leadership by victimhood when it comes to police murder of Black folks, and we can't have advancement in sports by colonization or colonial marginalization neither. So I think I'm advocating that Hiram do an hour or so, one program on sports, and he could reach out to folks like Deion and have a civil conversation with him, and you could keep me in the background. You keep me in the background, with the baseball bat.
No. You gotta be the.
No, man. Everybody got to know their lane, bro.
You gotta be the co-host.
No.
Standing up.
All these books behind me. All these books behind me is fake. They belong to my life coach Tanakil Jones. And she read every last one of them. So I'm just saying. No, seriously though, we do need to bring this dimension to this analysis and get people like Deion into this discussion, because we know the limitations of their message, and we know the class nature of the system and the white supremacist construct of the NFL and the sports in general. And I think you got a few conscious athletes, young athletes right now who see what we're talking about, and we need to try to get a voice to them, give them a sort of like a platform so we can have this discussion.
Sounds good to me. I keep saying that's exactly what I'm in favor of and inviting and hoping to see happen, because I definitely want to know
what is we doing.
It's some stupid shit there. you the guy.
Because Dhoruba, I can't, we got to.
How come you don't have step and fetch it? How come you don't have step and fetch it? Talking, I's coming, boss. I's coming fast as.
No,
real quick, because it came up. It came up in the chat, and I'm always in the chat. Shout out to the remixes. Is that the radicalization of young athletes is important. I'm sure. I mean, folks have been trying to do it since the days of Jim Brown, right, and Kareem and all those folks or whatever. But this notion around going back to Deion to wrap it up and just getting this piece of the pie, right? We understand. We know that the state and bourgeois society is not going to ever give us no piece of the pie unless they can control that, right? Mm-hmm. And we see that it came up with baseball and Major League Baseball. Right. In a few years, there will be no more so-called African-American baseball players in the major leagues. Right. Damn near maybe 50, 60 years after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. Most of those black athletes are going to be coming from the global South and specifically Latin America. And what ended up happening was many years ago, with the creation of these baseball academies in the Caribbean, in Venezuela, in Colombia, where Major League Baseball teams can go into these countries, literally buy an entire town, take all the boys, 13, right, under the age of 16, and just start drilling them and training them into baseball players, sifting, right, like the gold miners back in the conquest of the West.
Doing that with football now.
To find the next David Ortiz, Big Papi, the next Manny Machado, the next whatever. And those boys don't have to go into the draft. And so they can just pump all of their funding and their money, which is pennies in those countries, into these boys and come out and get them a super mega star. And what that ended up doing was killing the investment into urban sports, right? So baseball fields no longer. And now, and baseball is a big time money, right? Big time money sports. And so what you end up doing is now 50, 60 years after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, we're going right back again, where there will be no more African-American baseball players and Puerto Rican, right? Because Puerto Ricans under a colony, right? Again, Black and Puerto Rican, the Roberto Clementes, right? All these folks who are big time influencers in Major League Baseball are going to be wiped out completely because of colonialism, because of global capitalism, right? And the money system that plays in. So now you have all these kids who are still vying for football and basketball alone, because we're still in this place where shooting the ball, chasing the ball, hitting the ball is the only way out. Right. But we're not looking at the global implications, the global capitalism that's at play that is then locking the Dominican Republic, for one, right? Whole towns owned by Major League Baseball players. And when these boys don't pan out at 19, 20, 21 years old, now what do? Because they didn't go to school. They were being drilled to play baseball. And now you have whole generations of young men in these countries who can't do anything but play baseball, but they didn't make it to the major leagues. And so now where are they? They're either driving taxis in New York or they're back home trying to figure out what to do with their lives. Because the extraction of Black labor, the extraction of Black bodies that maintains this capitalist bourgeois state ultimately, right? This settler colonial state has to go. And the more that we can link these global politics to the sports that we try to escape ourselves in, and that our folks and our young people try to escape ourselves in, the better we are at being able to radicalize these young brothers, right, into one, seeking a better route than chasing the ball onto a field and destroying your body, right? Or two, understanding that the revenue, to Jerry's point, that they make from these sports should go back to the collective good. It should go back, right, to allowing so these institutions like the HBCUs can be at a lower rate, so more brothers and sisters can go to the and get themselves a college degree, or hopefully, right, free, right? Instead of waiting for reparations, we can build that now if we wanted to. That politic isn't there, and so I'll leave it at that. But someone brought up the baseball.
I don't think you should leave it at that. I don't think you should leave it at that. I think that's the introduction to your Black Power Media sports program. I know Jared got that on recording, so he could use that in our mix with you.
Hey, I've already told Dhoruba.
So Hiram, so I'm looking forward to trying to get folks on your program. What your podcast is going to be once or twice a week. I don't know how y'all going to work that, but I'm with it. I agree 100% with what you just said, and I think
as long as you my co-host on BSPN.
No, Jared's your co-host, man, because he's
I told him that I've already told Hiram I will work out a schedule around his, and I will produce his show.
Absolutely.
I will be his sidekick if he wants. If he got you, I'll sit in the background. Whatever has to happen.
You can't fuff this off, brother. You the one that talked about undermining the NIL house, undermining the union. My boy's in college, so he needs to hear this stuff. He needs to be able to give his coach a heads up on his email. Say, man, maybe you need to tune in Black Power Sports Media, you know, and so they put some braces in the back of these black coaches that's in the D1 who don't say nothing, you know. When
so
these kids are
Hiram, because we got to be able to answer.
I just don't know what I'm gonna do to this offense.
Stupid dude.
That's my new favorite podcast, The Big Simple out of DC. I have become a big fan of all of these people who have grown up in an era where they've never seen the Washington football team win, and they're all miserable and sad. So I have come back almost as a fan just to support this young generation of folks who are just heartbroken, trying to lead them out, bring them out.
Man. They're gonna get beat down, man. They bums. You see the Giants,
and good.
You see the Giants is 4-1. The Giants.
I have become an anti-fan. I tune in to watch them lose and to watch everybody be miserable until Dan Snyder is in jail, has been removed.
I'm about to break out my championship hat from 1990, 2005 or something.
There we go. So listen, ZZ Lion, thank you again. All the baseball are made in Haiti. Half of the Black Dominican are Haitian. That gets adopted and the name changed to be Dominican. Check out ESPN. Now we're going to say, no, with all due respect, thanks for the super chat. We're going to check out Hiram's BSPN, and co-hosted by Dhoruba. Dhoruba, man, look, I appreciate you. I love the fact I've said it publicly without you being around. I'll say what you hear. I love the fact that you are on this platform as often as you are. I love the fact that you will send us texts and chats and rant at me and others. I love it. And then I love that we can follow up and have a conversation with you publicly after the fact. And I also love that, Hiram, you were able to jump on with us as well. So
yeah, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I really appreciated I really appreciated your involvement, Hiram, and it sort of ameliorated some of the disagreement that Jared and I had, because I felt that I understood the big picture that you were talking about, but I also know that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. And everybody ain't prepared to take that step. And some people they do the right thing for the wrong reason. Some people do the wrong thing for the right reason, but I think we have to understand the limitations that's involved right now. But the way you broke it down on how sports it has been since we've been here, used just like music to encapsulate a certain type of energy and power from our community and misdirect it and keep it away from empowering us, So I think it's very important, Jared and Hiram, that I was important to me, and I hope to the listeners to have had this discussion. And I'm glad I graded you the wrong way and you felt misunderstood.
No, I love it.
And you just had to have this program, I told Hiram,
call me
at 3 o'clock in the morning, posting stuff. I said, this must be from Africa because they're like 5 hours ahead of us. I said, this is from Jared? I said, yeah.
I told Hiram, I said, any excuse, anything that will get you to come on. So anytime we have an exchange, I'm always going to end it with, please come on and talk about it. So I appreciate you. And anytime, this is your home away from home for both of you. So whenever we can work out the schedule for this B-Span, or I mean BSPN on B-Span and Dhoruba's return on whatever show, whatever, I love it. So, you know, and whenever. It's always an open invitation to the both of you. So thank you both very much. I really
thank you, Jared. And again,
thank you, Jared.
It's an honor to be in conversation. Even if it's about football, it's an honor to be in conversation with you, brothers. So thank you. And as always, thank you for your sacrifice and everything you've done for us as a people. So
yes, sir.
It was
yes,
fun.
sir.
It was cool.
All right, good people. Like we always say, like Fred Hampton used to say to you, we know we can say peace because these two brothers will definitely fight for it. I'm gonna come back and we're gonna go look at this Panamanian Festival for a few minutes to wrap up today. But thank you both very much, and catch you all next time here at I Mix What I Like It through the BPM platform. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.